Another reason why I left religion, the church, Christianity, and fundamentalism is that the church creates cis privilege. Now, we've already talked what heterosexuality is, what cisgender is, and we've talked about the different forms of white privilege, male privilege, heterosexual privilege, social privilege. We're going to talk about now how the church creates an environment that is predominantly heterosexual, cisgendered. Now, don't get me wrong, there are lots of very interesting denominations and churches out there that are extremely inclusive, and they allow and welcome people of all different orientations. However, I didn't grow up in those churches. I grew up in Southern Baptist, Calvinistic, and fundamentalist extreme versions of Christianity. Not one church ever talked about anything that wasn't hetero and cis. They didn't even use those terms because that would imply there was something that wasn't. We never talked about people who didn't want to get married. We never talked about people who were anything but single waiting for marriage. We never talked about people who aren't attracted to marriage, or people may want a relationship but no sex, may want sex in bursts of interest but not daily. We never talked about any orientations that wasn't the norm. We talked about men as though they were all sex-crazed monsters that suffered with thought process issues. Lust, pornography was a big, big male-centered issue. No one ever talked about how women struggle with this problem. The only time I ever heard of women struggling with a little bit of this issue was in a Christian book. If you've read books like Every Man's Problem or Every Young Man's Issues, you get the idea that they expect all men to have no self-control. Why would they? Why would men in church have self-control? When the church sets up dynamics that blame women, protect men, and create the next generation's predators in church. When there is a hetero-cis privilege that leans very much into the male center of the church, male pastors, male deacons, male elders, male teachers, you get a very possibly toxic dynamic. And if you've been in churches where this doesn't exist, where there are plenty of queer and female leaders, good for you. It doesn't exist consistently in the church hierarchies I grew up in. Men are always in charge. Women always do the potluck. Nobody ever swapped teams and did something that wasn't what gender they were assigned. Nobody had any choice what they were going to do. Everybody was like everyone else. If a woman was the music minister, she was later fired because for no other reason than not being a man.